under the deplorable conditions that we're living in.
So I've gavelled in. The regular meeting of the Board of Education for October 24th, 2017 is called to order. Welcome to everyone present. It's a sea of blue and green here tonight. Any item that will be voted on this evening has been posted as required by state law. This meeting is being televised live and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the board website for replay times. This meeting is also being streamed live on PPS TV services. Director Anthony is traveling, but he's here with us by phone this evening. As a reminder, we now have our PPS Ombudsman, Judy Martin, attending all regular board meetings. Specifically, Judy will be here to listen to the public comments and, if appropriate, provide additional support to families who need or want it. Judy can be reached at 503-916-3045 or ombudsman@pps.net. We also have interpreters with us this evening, and I'd like to ask them to come forward at this time, introduce themselves in the language they will be interpreting, and inform the audience where they'll be located in the auditorium should someone need their assistance.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Кристина, я русская переводчица. Если вы нуждаетесь в переводе, то вы можете найти меня там сзади, в коридоре.
Buenas tardes, me llamo Lucía, soy la intérprete en español. Si me necesitan, voy a estar al fondo contra la pared. Gracias.
Kính chào quý vị, nếu quý vị cần thông dịch viên người Việt Nam, xin quý vị ra đằng sau của hội trường. Xin cảm ơn quý vị.
Thank you. So to start off tonight's meeting, I'd like to announce that Nancy Bond, a longtime PPS employee, the Resource Conservation Program Manager, was awarded the Intertwine Alliance Lifetime Achievement Award on October 18th. And I'd like to ask Nancy and Jerry Vincent to come forward. This award, as you're coming forward, this award honors an individual who's made significant contributions to the legacy of this movement in our region through leadership, vision, and partnership building. The award criteria has more than 10 years involvement in completing major projects in the Intertwine region, has had a significant impact on communities within the region, helping to make them healthier and more sustainable, consistency of effort over time, impact on multiple organizations and people, and displays an innovative, collaborative approach to achieving goals. Congratulations.
Good evening, board members and community. Many people know who Nancy Bond is in this community. I'm really excited to be here to talk about Nancy. So Nancy is one of the bright spots in what we do here. I want to come back to a future board meeting is tell you about our sustainability program and all that we do. And a lot of that's due to Nancy. She's our resource conservation coordinator or our sustainability coordinator. She's been with us 18 years in the district. Nancy is in charge of the greening of our schoolyards. That's everything from gardens to stormwater to depave to planting trees, nature play equipment. And just for fun, she oversees our entire trash and recycling contract for the whole district, and that ties into our Community Care Day. She oversees alternative energy, which is our small-scale solar projects that we roll out. And Nancy oversees, we are an AmeriCorps sponsor. We have Sammy Springs with us in the audience from AmeriCorps. And Nancy is mentoring her and has been for 2 years now. And Sammy is part of our emerging professionals through AmeriCorps. Just can't say enough about the effort from Nancy, and it's actually getting to know her and knowing what she does and what we do with this community and this district is what led me to create a new department separate from facilities called Sustainability and Compliance, so we can take sustainability in Portland Public Schools to the next level. So without further ado, Nancy Bond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm really deeply honored to be here. I love this work. I have been so privileged to have the opportunity to do this work for 18 years. This is my right work. Even through all the changes that I've experienced here, under under 10 superintendents. Welcome. It's a nice round number, don't you think? So it really has been my privilege to have the support of the district in doing this work, and it's been my pleasure to work with the community and to make our schools a little bit more sustainable, both in practice and in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, and congratulations. We're very proud of your work and honored that you've stayed with us for 18 years. And hopefully that's the last, 10 is the last number. Now I'd like to ask Director Moore to, we have got an election coming up. I'd like Director Moore to speak briefly about the PCC bond renewal.
I have a statement of support that I'm going to ask my colleagues on the board to support tonight. Here is the statement. The Portland School Board urges voters to renew the Portland Community College capital bond measure. This bond would maintain the current tax rate and produce up to $185 million to support the modernization of classrooms, safety, security, and ADA accessibility, and the expansion of high-demand offerings in the health professions and workforce training programs for more than 75,000 students per year. Portland demonstrated its strong support for public education by passing PPS's bond in May, and we urge voters to continue that investment in our collective future by supporting PCC now. You should already have received your ballots. Please remember to vote by November 7th. That's the statement, and
We're not going to have a formal vote, but I think people should indicate if they're supportive of the board, indicating its support for this, and if anybody wants to have any comments.
I've already voted yes.
Thank you for...
Vote early, vote often.
Thanks, Rita. I support it.
This is one of our most important partnerships as a district. We have embedded programming in most of our high schools through dual credit options and try to connect our own CTE programming with that of PCC. So what's good for them is good for us and vice versa.
And I support it too.
Anybody else?
I will convey that to the PCC campaign, and hopefully Portland will show its real commitment. I mean, Portland has consistently shown tremendous support for education, and I hope the trend continues. Thanks.
So before we get to the student and public comment, we have a brief announcement about an update on the independent investigation into issues involving the former employee Mitch Whitehurst and any the changes that PPS might make to its policies and practices and procedures. The investigation is ongoing, and we wanted to remind the community there's two ways they can provide information to the investigators. First, there's an email, whitehurst.investigation@stoll.com, and that's Stoll, STOEL.com. And that remains available for anyone who has relevant information they want to share with investigators. Second, a confidential phone line has been set up. The number is 503-972-1580. The phone line does not track caller ID and therefore allows individuals to remain anonymous if they choose not to leave their contact information. The line immediately goes to a voicemail. The investigators would like to hear from anyone with relevant information regarding the allegations of sexual misconduct and abuse by Mitch Whitehurst. While the information line and email are available to the general public, the investigation's confidential info line and email are intended to gather evidence from the following groups: former and current students, class of 1983 to 2017, who've witnessed, is that right? Is it 2017? Okay, 2017, who've witnessed or been subject to sexual conduct or abuse by Mitch Whitehurst. Former or current PPS employees who may have witnessed or have been informed about any alleged sexual conduct or abuse by Whitehurst. Former and current PPS employees who have knowledge of how PPS responded or didn't respond to reports of the alleged conduct. Former and current PPS families and employees who have firsthand experience with PPS's complaint reporting process for staff, student sexual conduct, meaning they have tried to report sexual conduct to PPS, who want to discuss ways to improve that process. And last, anyone else in the community with firsthand knowledge of any inappropriate conduct by Mitch Whitehurst involving a PPS student or firsthand knowledge of a PPS employee not responding appropriately after becoming aware of the conduct. So we appreciate the community's assistance to date, and those are just 2 additional ways in which people can directly contact the investigators. So with that, we are going to move into student and public comment. Before we begin the public comment period, I'd like to review our guidelines for public comment. The board thanks the community for taking the time to attend this meeting and provide your comments to the board. We value public input as it informs our work, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts, reflections, and concerns. Our responsibility as a board is to actively listen with our electronic devices turned off. Board members will not respond to comments or questions during board comment, but our board office will follow up on issues raised during public testimony. Guidelines for public input emphasize respect and consideration for others. Complaints about individual employees should be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter. People tonight will have a total of 3 minutes to share your comments. Please begin by stating your name and spelling your last name for the record. During the first 2 minutes of testimony, a green light will appear. When you have 1 minute remaining, a yellow light will go on, and when your time is up, the red light will go on and a buzzer will sound. We respectfully ask that you conclude your comments at that time. We appreciate your input, and thank you for your cooperation. Ms. Hewson, I know we have some people signed up for public comment. Can you call the individuals, starting with the students?
We have Aiden Boatner and Phoebe Perez.
Okay, my name is Aiden Boatner, Boatner. I'm a 4th grader at Access Academy. Thank you, superintendent and board members, for coming to learn about my school. I really love my school. It is a very different experience. I've compared it to my old school, and no one is mean, no one makes fun of me, and I can work with my friends in class, unlike my old school. We are all very different, but at the same time, we are all very similar. I want to tell you 3 things before this important vote. Number 1, please keep Access as a part of your plan. Without a clear plan at home, I'm worried, and I know my parents are super worried too. Number 2, please keep Access together. I played card games with middle schoolers, and I'm looking forward to take middle school math next year. Please keep Access available for more kids. I was waitlisted for 2 years ever since my kindergarten teacher suggested for me to come to Access. I wish I could have started before having bad experiences at school, and I felt bad about myself. I hope no other kids have to go through what I did. Thank you for listening, and thank you for making a good decision about our successful program.
Thank you.
My name is Phoebe Perez, P-E-R-E-Z, and at my old school, I had a lot of troubles, and right before I came to Access, I had just gotten taken out of an abusive school that only cared about obedience. During the summer, I thought I was going to get homeschooled because I didn't really have any other options, but then 1 week before school started, when I got into Access, I was so happy. I'd never been so excited to go to school. So I learned so much at Access, things about myself too, and I hope other kids get the same experience, so we need a bigger building so they can have that experience. if access gets separated, it might ruin some of these kids' futures, including mine, because I'd probably have to get homeschooled because I can't handle that kind of environment. So please keep access together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Layla Conley and Francisca Alvarez.
Hello, my name is Amelia Kotamarti, Kotamarti, and I'm speaking on behalf of Layla Conley, Conley, because she could not be here tonight. So I'm an 8th grader at Access, and I can speak from experience. Access I've seen a huge transformation in myself, in tons of my peers, and in people in grades below me. And I would like to thank the school board and the superintendent from the bottom of my heart for keeping Access together and giving us another chance. But in order to have that chance, we first need to have a home where we can learn. And I'm going to be graduating next year, but for my other peers in the lower grades and for students who aren't at Access yet but still need it, I can speak for them in saying that they need a home as well, and we need a place where we can grow so that as many kids as possible can access this program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Buenas noches, yo soy Francisca Alvarez, Alvarez, and I teach 2nd grade in a dual language program in Spanish at SCAT School, also referred to as a DLI. SCAT is a focus school serving a diverse community. This is my 11th year within my teaching career. I have taught for 6 years in English only, and this is my 5th year teaching in the DLI program. I am here today to represent my colleagues teaching in any of the DLI programs in PPS. I'm going to share concrete examples of the inequities my students and I encounter on a daily basis. I teach 2nd grade following the 90-10 model, which means that 70% of my day is conducted in Spanish and 30% in English. I teach literacy, math, and writing in Spanish. Literacy. This is the only curriculum provided in Spanish. However, math, all the teacher guides, math supplements are provided to me in English. This means that I have to translate every lesson into Spanish before I can teach it to my students. If you are a monolingual teacher, you do not have a clue about how time-consuming it is to translate math vocabulary and concepts into another language on a daily basis. For example, math workplaces. The students' worksheets are already translated. However, the materials and instructions for the workplaces are not. Where is the equity for my students here? Many of my students are the ones who have been historically underserved. To provide some equity, I have to literally cut and paste the game labels and game boards. These are only a couple of examples for you to notice. There are 10 sessions of workplaces and 6 centers for each session. Writing. The same ordeal is followed with the writing binder provided by the district. The lessons are written in English, and I have to translate each lesson, create anchor charts, and find mentor books to make it accessible for my students. Math and writing are 2 examples of workload inequalities among a monolingual teacher and a DLI teacher. I can continue on for many hours with concrete examples of the work I have to do on a daily basis because I am part of the DLI program. I have to translate during parent-teachers conferences, letters to send home, and programs adopted by the school, such as PACS, CHAMPS, or AVID, or any other program they decide to adopt. The mission of the DLI program is to close the opportunity gap for historically underserved students. I can testify to this mission because I have witnessed the change in my students now in the DLI program compared to those I taught in a monolingual setting. But at this price, my back aches every night due to the additional workload I have to endure to meet the needs of my students. I invite you all to come to and spend time at our classroom because, as Dolores Huerta says, to understand the problems of a community, you must become a member of that community. Gracias. Thank you.
Next, we have Sarah Brown and Greg Burrell.
Hi, my name is Sarah Brown, Brown like the color, B-R-O-W-N. I'm the art teacher at Ainsworth and Maplewood Elementary Schools. I'm a second-year teacher, and I split my time between two schools to maintain full-time employment with PPS. I'd like to share the realities of my workload to help the board understand the urgency for a contract that provides teachers what we need to best serve the growing population of PPS students. Teachers spend their careers celebrating the unique identities of each young learner and forming strong bonds with students to give them the best opportunities to learn and succeed. We are here as teachers for a second year fighting for a contract that gives us time and appropriate caseload to tend to the vast needs of the students in our charge. Between the two schools where I teach, I reach 1,018 students. I know deeply those, I know as deeply as possible those 1,018 brains, 1,018 personalities, and 1,018 innovative thinkers, learners, and artists. Over an 8-day period, I teach every student in 2 schools. I'm not the only one. I smile at every one of them as they make discoveries about the world of art and visual communication. We spend 40 meager minutes together each visit, and I'm somehow expected to know each student, their struggles, their talents, their IEP and 504 accommodations, their language proficiencies and learning styles, not to mention their personal traumas, their intricate family structures, and the things that they deal with when they're not in school. I have 1,018 barometers that measure how successful I am as a teacher. Is this justified? PPS needs to be a school district that shows that it values and supports the learning styles of all students and that provides funding and access to the arts and PE for all students, regardless of community contributions. If one school were funded enough to hire me as a full-time art teacher, I could work with my colleagues to support the variety of student needs and be really proud of that work. We could ensure that each and every student is relating to the content and finding success in learning. I am surely not the only teacher with a workload this large, and I implore the board to please think about the impact of this on both teachers and their students, and to help us secure a contract that will support good teaching and learning. I have 1,018 children this year. They are your children, Portland, and I hope this community and the board realizes that teachers' working conditions are your children's learning conditions. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Greg Burrell, that's B-U-R-R-I-L-L. Superintendent Guerrero, board directors, PPS employees, ladies and gentlemen, whether here or in person watching, thank you for all that you do for our children. I've been addressing this board for several years, watching as budget cuts and poor decisions decimate our students' education. School budgets have been cut in every biennium for 27 years, and the cuts that happened during the Great Recession went deeper than the bone. Students who started kindergarten in the 2009-10 school year are 7th graders. And the 7th graders I'm teaching this year as a substitute are different than 7th graders of the past, and not necessarily in a good way. I've been reminding angry stakeholders that we need forgiveness, even as actions by the board and PPS management have further eroded trust and created chaos at buildings around the district. I canvassed for the passage of Measure 97, knowing that if it failed, we would be unable to provide legally mandated services to many students. We fail to support kids with special needs daily and break laws about the provision of mandated services. We have kindergarten classes with over 25 students, often containing students who have been mainstreamed, an idea I favor, by the way, but having students with academic or behavioral challenges and inadequate paraeducator support in overfilled classrooms is unconscionable. Yeah. After years of championing what is best for students, helping teachers fight for better learning conditions for our students, helping Oregon legislators understand what we endure in our schools, and testifying against some of the worst decisions I've heard come from the top down, I'm as discouraged as I've ever been. In the 80s, PPS was one of the leading public school systems in the nation. Districts across the country bought our curricula. We used a standardized test that we created to test what we were going to teach. We gave it at the beginning of the year and again at the end of the year. In 3 minutes, I can't tell you much of the story about where all this outstanding accomplishment has gone, but Superintendent Guerrero, I ask you to make the best decisions that you can to use our inadequate resources to provide the best education our children can get.
Thank you. Thank you to the members of the public who testified and our teachers here. Now, let's see, sorry, my agenda. I always like doing this announcement because it's one that always gets a lot of applause. I'd like to invite Suzanne Cohen, President of the Portland Association of Teachers. The guaranteed applause line.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for the time on the agenda this evening. I'm here representing about 4,500 educators in Portland Public Schools. And I think I speak for all our members when I say the dysfunction in PPS has gone on long enough. We are filled with hope. We have new leadership on the board, in central office, and our hope leads us to believe that we will be able to get PPS back on track. But if you want to fix the very real problems in our district, you need to start listening to the frontline educators. We're in the classrooms every day making sure that PPS students get the education they deserve. And you need to trust our professional judgment, and you need to support us. Your role, Chair Brim Edwards and Superintendent Guerrero, is to make sure that we have the tools, the trainings, the time we need to teach our students. We have not felt this support this year, and it's not just because we're starting our second school year without a contract, or well into our second school year without a contract. One symptom of this district dysfunction is the enormous disconnect between what district officials tell you is happening in PPS and what we see every day in our buildings. And so sometimes it feels like we're talking about two entirely different school districts. And this is incredibly demoralizing for us as educators, and it's a real barrier to helping our students succeed. So tonight I'm going to encourage you to put away the rose-colored glasses that you've been given and listen to a few examples of the problems that are affecting educators every day. And I want you to understand the urgency that we are feeling, and I hope that you can start seeing the realities that we're actually facing in the buildings. We started this school year with cuts, with larger class sizes, less administrative support, and with more work expected from each educator. But instead of acknowledging this and stepping in to resolve these issues, we've been met with denial that the problem even exists. Oregon has the nation's third worst class sizes, but we are told that we can't talk about class size. Why?
Why?
I've heard some argue that Portland is better than other districts in the state. Let's be honest. Being the best amongst the worst isn't a badge of honor. It's really just an excuse to deny the reality of what's happening to our working conditions and our students' learning conditions. As a middle school math teacher, I warn my students that averages can be very deceiving. And so I want to stress to you also to look at more than just average class sizes. Because when you dig a little deeper, you'll start seeing the discrepancies and inequities that exist across the district. Some problems stem from putting too many different programs in one building, and others stem from overloading certain educators. An example of this is a PE teacher at Peninsula who spoke to district leadership 2 weeks ago about teaching 2 classes at the same time in one period. That's over 50 first graders in one PE class. Now, does that really count as offering PE? When you're given a document on paper that a school has an art program, what do you picture? Can you imagine anything like the reality that Sarah just described, where she's splitting her time between 2 schools and struggling to get to know more than 1,000 students? We speak in PPS about every student by name. And how can you have a saying like that when there isn't even support for a classroom teacher to know every student by name? Isn't that the kind of quality, is that really the kind of quality student engagement we're trying to foster in this district? And as Francisca described so vividly, our dual language instructors need curriculum in the language they're teaching. And when the district doesn't provide it, they've been filling in the gaps, translating materials as well as instructing their students. Now, we've been advocating for workload relief for our dual language instructors, but instead of listening, respecting, and supporting them, the message is they have everything they need. Your educators are telling you that they do not have the curriculum they need. And that's a problem that you have the power to fix, but not if you're busy denying that it exists. So we want to know, when will the district stop ignoring problems and pretending they don't exist? Special education is another area where the district continues to ignore serious, ongoing problems. Special educators have been telling you that their caseloads are too high. They do not have the support from you that they need to serve our most vulnerable students. Whether it's additional para-educators to provide critical one-on-one attention or more time to work through their extreme caseloads. But overloading one special education educator in a school has a ripple effect throughout the entire building. When a classroom teacher with a shortage of special education support has a student with unmet needs, other resource people, if your building is even fortunate enough to have them, get pulled away from their own duties or their caseloads. So we have counselors being pulled from counseling to work with, a couple of students all of the time. And so then what happens is all the other students that need counseling have unmet needs that then escalate. We have reading specialists that can deliver targeted instruction to our students that are most at risk for not reading, and yet they get pulled to work with just a few students, and then those students that need the reading instruction aren't getting it. And even our principals are getting pulled to spend their time with just a few students with the most urgent special education needs. These unorganized systems create a real conflict for resources, and the result is a negative impact on our students. And finally, I want to talk a little bit more about middle schools, because you're voting tonight to open 2 middle schools. And as a middle school teacher, I'm excited to talk about what we can do to support students at this critical point in their education. But tonight, as you discuss how we're going to support students headed to Tubman or Roseway Heights, I want to ask you about what you've learned from our recent experiences opening Ockley Green. Because let me tell you a few things that I've heard from the educators who have been working so hard to make sure that Ockley Green succeeds. For starters, it's clear that any new middle school should start by building a schedule that works for all its students and staff. And then we also need to ensure reasonable class sizes across all the programs in the building, not end up in a situation where some classes have 17 students and others have 36. And we need to allocate planning time for the whole staff so they can get to know each other and build the systems so necessary to making a school run smoothly. Yes. And most critically, you cannot keep adding all these nice to haves while you're cutting all the have to haves. We owe it to the Tubman and Roseway Heights communities to make sure that these new middle schools succeed. But we also owe it to the Ockley Green community to give them this same level of support so Ockley Green can succeed as well. I really do want to thank you for all the work that each of you are doing on the school board and for all your service to our Portland students. But let me close by reminding you what our bargaining chair, Steve Lancaster, said, that our patience is as expired as our contract. The 8 of you, Paul Anthony on the phone, have the ability to solve these problems we face in our classrooms and to settle a fair contract with these city's educators. And we're asking you to lead the way. Thank you very much. Thank you.
What if we put on our shirts and did it? What if we put on our shirts and did that too? Well, I think I'll just let them know. Yeah. So I'm just going to move on to the next agenda item. It's just an update. It's an update on the public records policy. We have been working for the last several months to update and revise our policy to provide greater transparency to our public business. The district has sent out an initial draft policy by email to all stakeholders, including the public who have requested it, and all of our labor organizations a number of weeks ago, and it's been posted on the district website for review and comment since September 25th. The board has received and considered feedback that needs to be reviewed by legal and staff advisors and the board task force and potentially incorporated. We're going to bring this, once that's done, we'll bring this policy back for further review and public discussion before voting on a final policy. The board remains committed to efforts to improve transparency in its operations and provide accurate accounting of how the district carries out the public business. So the next agenda item is one that I'm really excited about. For the last, for over a year, planning has been underway to open new middle schools and really fulfill the commitment that the district has made to students in many neighborhoods who haven't had an equitable middle school experience. And so we had a staff proposal that was brought forth, and we've had many weeks of listening sessions, public hearings, and work sessions. And I'm going to ask in a moment for the superintendent to provide the overview, but before we do that, I just want to acknowledge all the staff work that's gone into this, not just this particular, the last couple months, but I know work's happened over the last year, so thanks to the staff for everything you've done. And with that, I'd like to ask Superintendent Guerrero to tee up the discussion for the resolution.
Thank you, Chair Brim Edwards, and good evening, directors, and good evening, members of the community, both those that are watching and those that have turned out this evening. We have a very important main topic on tonight's agenda. It's been a long time coming, and the board is aiming to take a direct action on a Portland Public School commitment to providing an equitable education to more middle grade students, particularly those in historically underserved communities. This is a landmark occasion for a number of reasons. It's a big step forward for Portland Public Schools and our effort to improve student achievement and outcomes. And even though I've only been on the job for a few weeks, I know that and I understand that there's a great deal of history and that there's a journey that has come with this effort to get to this place. A key objective of making sure that we're ensuring that students during their middle grades experience, that we afford them the most comprehensive, enriched middle grades experiences as possible. And I too want to recognize a lot of incredible work that has gone into this, not just from our staff who've been involved, DBRAC, community members and leaders, our school leaders, principals, and many folks that have come before us. Who initiated this conversation, who understood that we haven't yet realized our fullest potential for our students, especially in these middle grades. I want to congratulate the board in advance for staying with it and being dedicated to seeing this initiative through. You haven't yet completed your first 100 days either, so I think it would be a great feather in your hat. And I know it hasn't been easy to try to arrive at understanding all of the intricacies and the details that come with wanting to open a couple of comprehensive middle schools. And it's a good thing to know that there's been a real effort to try to understand all the facets that come with a resolution like this, and more importantly, the political will that it takes to take this courageous act forward. So what are we considering tonight? Tonight being considered is a resolution that calls for opening 2 middle schools, one at Roseway Heights, the other at Harriet Tubman. It sets feeder schools and their associated boundary changes. Caught up in this effort is in an effort to also try to bring some balance to the enrollment at a variety of campuses. All of this has come after much board discussion and many hosted community sessions. Part of the process in designating 2 comprehensive schools means that there are some programs and some school communities that get displaced in that effort. So this resolution calls for also making sure that we identify a home for the Adams, and I do see the sign there. It calls for finding the Access Academy, a bridge or a permanent facility, ideally, or facilities for the academy, because we know it would need to relocate in order to open Rose City Park as a neighborhood school, which is a crucial component of opening Roseway Heights as a middle school. And we're doubling down our efforts to find a home for the Access Academy. I know that there's been an initial meeting with staff. I apologize for not being able to be present this past week, but I can assure you that we have doubled down our efforts this week. In fact, was up at sunrise today joining staff inspecting facilities. I am optimistic that after we exhaust every option to find a suitable location that hopefully avoids the need to split the community, to house the Access Academy, to continue doing what it does and continue to grow and build and provide the kind of experience that we heard our students again tonight so eloquently express. Separately, though not unrelated, the resolution also includes language that affirms our commitment to identifying and providing program supports and services to all gifted and talented students, and that we start the journey of actually beginning to implement many good ideas and roadmaps that have already started to be developed. Harriet Tubman. This resolution also calls for a comprehensive health and safety assessment of Harriet Tubman. It asks us to take all reasonable measures to test for things like lead, radon, asbestos, and any other hazardous materials that may be a cause for concern for our students, any students. That includes indoor and outdoor air quality tests. Board members, I believe, are proposing this evening that we make the commitment to completing those health and safety assessments, especially after hearing those concerns and questions from community members about the location and condition of the site at Harriet Tubman. The district staff is equally concerned and want to make sure, and I as superintendent, that we take all necessary and appropriate action, that we complete all tests and assessments necessary to ensure that it is a healthy and safe facility for any students and the staff that work in them. We're going to look to expedite that analysis, and that could take a little while. That could take several months, in fact. And that could delay the opening of Harriet Tubman if it were to be the site of a middle school. So out of an abundance of caution, we're going to be asking for an amendment in the resolution that would allow the district to continue on a Plan B, an alternative site for a middle school that serves the Albina neighborhood if it gets to the point where that is a necessary thing. We understand that this places a degree of uncertainty in the middle school implementation plan, and I think it's also important that we realistically plan for all possibilities as best we can. I look forward to tonight's discussion and vote and to any questions that our directors may have. Staff is here again tonight to answer questions and provide details. But again, the bigger picture here tonight is that our board of directors is deliberating a pretty bold resolution, one that affirms and ensures that many more of our students will have that access to a comprehensive experience in the middle grades, which at its root is a fundamental question of equity. So we look forward to tonight's discussion.
Thank you, Superintendent Guerrero. So tonight's going to be, because this is a big, complex issue, as we've found, the process by which we're going to have our discussion tonight, so in a moment I'll ask for a motion to bring the resolution forward, but I thought it's worth just describing how we're going to move ahead this evening. So on October 14th, we had the final version of the staff report, the proposal for Harriet Tubman and Roseway Heights Middle Schools clusters released and presented by the staff. We've had multiple community meetings. Last board meeting, we had a lengthy discussion by board members that essentially was a discussion about the draft resolution, which would have implemented the staff report. We also identified issues that were of concern that had been raised during the process that weren't yet in the resolution. And we had a discussion at the board meeting about those issues, whether it was access or the supplemental resources for under-enrolled K-8s, Vernon, the Harriet Tubman environmental assessment. And there was board agreement at the work session to add those to the resolution. So the resolution we have before us tonight, which is Resolution 5528, is a compilation of the staff report with the additional issues that were identified at the last board meeting. So tonight we've got the resolution in front of us. We also are going to, there have been identified a number of issues that, some further amendments, and so after we bring the resolution forward for discussion, we'll ask individual board members that have prepared amendments, and I believe they've all been posted. Is that correct? Yes, they've all been posted. So there's a number of amendments online. All the ones that have been posted aren't necessarily going to be offered, so I just offer that. So most of them should, but I think there's one that's not going to be actually proposed. So that's going to be the process, and we'll work through each of the individual amendments, vote on them, and then we'll complete our discussion about the underlying resolution and have a vote. And I think at the beginning, I guess I'll ask the board, is there a preference to have the public comment at the beginning or and after our discussion? Let's do it at the beginning. So at the beginning, we'll have the public comments. So since we're acting on this resolution tonight, also there's an opportunity for public comment anytime the board's voting on something. So with that, I'd like to ask for a motion.
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
Director Bailey moves Resolution 5528, and Director Comstam seconds the motion. Ms. Hewson, can you ask for individuals who have signed up to have a comment?
Yes, we have Drew McGee and Brian Chu.
My name is Brian Chu. Is this thing on? Okay. Who is Harriet Tubman Middle School really opening up for? The school-to-prison pipeline no longer exists. It has shape-shifted into the school and prison nexus where prisons and schools mirror each other. Both hungry for black and brown bodies, it gets them young and swallows them whole. Meanwhile, school board members, administrators, parents, teachers, and well-intentioned people of all colors under the sun claim that equity is a priority and that they want it for all. PPS. We do not believe what you say because we see what you do, and we see what you have done, and we are not at peace with your processes. In fact, we are disappointed, unimpressed, but definitely not surprised. Is it really so difficult to give people what they need when they need it? James Baldwin says, history is not the past, it is the present. We carry our history with us, we are our history. If we pretend otherwise, we literally are criminals. PPS reproduces a culture of apathy and indifference under the umbrella of equity that in reality facilitates state-sanctioned violence against black and brown people. Black and brown kids remain unrecognized for their genius because the AP, IB, SAT, and the talented and gifted tests are known to be racially biased. This is violence. Black and brown kids are still overrepresented in remedial ELL and special education classes. This is violence. High-stakes standardized testing targets schools and low-income communities of color for sanctions and interventions, while middle and upper-income communities fear an embarrassing drop in their state report card. This is violence. So-called equity practices were brought into PPS in order to close the racial achievement gap. The very same racist high-stakes standardized tests created the racial achievement gap and were designed so the gap would never be closed. This is violence. The PPS key priority to reduce out-of-school discipline for all students by 50% and reduce the disparity of suspensions and expulsions between white students and students of color by 50% was being achieved by sending students home without actually suspending them and by sending them back into classrooms with no accountability. This is violence. When the snapshot becomes the big picture and we choose to invest in proficiency instead of highly proficient human beings, then we know this white supremacist system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. This is violence. Are we assimilationists or anti-racists? Do we want to perpetuate violence or put an end to it? Do we intend on making history or repeating it? Is it really so difficult for PPS to understand that the most historically underserved and marginalized communities are the ones you work with first? These are the questions we as individuals must ask ourselves, and let's not forget that PPS is a system comprised of individuals, all of which must answer the questions put forth and breathe life into the words we say. When Harriet Tubman Middle School opens in the future or in the fall, will it be revolutionary? Reality pedagogy professor Dr. Christopher Emdin says, in the world of education, words like revolution get thrown around, and revolution oftentimes means change. But if you think about revolution mathematically, if I stood here and made a complete revolution, I'd end up exactly where I started. If we are honest with each other, if we are consistent, if we're willing to commit to one another, then we can change the paradigm and create a way more beautiful world for our children and for us. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Will PPS become a beacon for racial equity or a tiki torch for white supremacy? Only time and Tubman will tell. Black schools matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Taisha Smith and Tatiana Turtle.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. I think we can all safely come to the agreement that the middle schools need to open as soon as possible. However, the proposal that you currently have isn't really just about opening a middle school. The previous superintendent thought she could fix too many things all at once, and perhaps that's why she's no longer here. I believe the reason this has taken so many years is because there are too many knots in this plan. Are you opening a middle school, or are you trying to figure out how to balance equity and under-enrollment? Are you fixing boundaries, or are you solving racial inequity? Because at this point, it's incredibly convoluted and hard to tell what your end goal is. Our group of parents had to canvass an area and knock door to door to realize that this big 5 to 10 year long awaited plan of solving underserved children and making things equitable all panned out to only include 40 children. And about 5 per year that were going to the new middle school, and maybe 3 to 5 that will be entering kindergarten. No offense, but if this is the best that your team of staff and analysts have been able to come up with after this long process is to move 40 kids from 15 blocks to a school further away, then I hope they weren't charging you hourly. If your goal is to open 2 middle schools, then congratulations, the finish line is in sight tonight. However, if you plan on solving racial inequity and balanced student enrollment, then I strongly urge you to wait and create an entire East Side plan. You have 2 schools. You have 2 schools in the same neighborhood on the same street with the exact same focus option. Both have struggling neighborhood programs. Does anyone else here not think it's a good idea to take a closer look at those? Maybe it's time to move the underserved Scott children down the street and give access that building. Thank you. How about the fact that there are 40 children who have currently been allowed to leave their neighborhood school to attend Roseway Heights, and now, instead of requiring those children go back to Scott, you instead decide to pull 40 children from their cohorts? Does that even make sense? I'm for equity, and I'm for finding solutions to these problems, and I'm also for finding a way of addressing this in a comprehensive plan. So that's it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tatiana Turdal, T-E-R-D-A-L. I'm a parent of 2 children with special needs at Access Academy. I implore the board to delay the vote on the boundaries until there is a location for Access where we can stay whole. Like most kids at Access, my kids came to Access from neighborhood schools. And we applied to Access for 3 years in a row to get a spot, because we saw that once in kindergarten that things were not going well. And the school saw that things were not going well, and they strongly supported our application to Access. We tried, the school tried, but at the end, it just did not work out to the point that we had to leave school at spring break. We could not even finish the year. We basically left PPS, left our neighborhood school, and just registered as homeschoolers. So it's perfectly understandable that a neighborhood school that has limited resources, that is overcrowded, will be spending all its resources on 99% of its kids. And the outliers are just fall through the cracks. So what happens with those kids who fall through the cracks? Well, many of those kids have found home at Access, just like my kids. And suddenly, from being outsiders, from being just afterthoughts, they're the focus of attention. Suddenly, there are resources for them. Suddenly, they are atypical kids. And that makes a whole bunch of difference. You know, for us as parents, finding a home, a community makes a big difference. And for the kids, it makes a huge difference. So I want to implore you to give us more time, because I feel like our kids fell through the cracks in neighborhood schools, and I think Access as a community fell through the cracks during planning process. Because we draw kids from 90% of neighborhoods. You know, if you have a kid there, kid there, kid there, you don't see as much impact as if it was 300 kids from one neighborhood. But it's a lot of kids. They need resources, they need attention, they need this whole program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, actually, I have a bit of more time. I see it. So I'll give you a visual. I saw kids smash a pumpkin recently, and I can tell you they took this beautiful pumpkin, so nice and whole, and they started smashing it, and pieces just flew everywhere, and it was a big mess. And then when I saw the proposal to dissolve Access, I just thought about the pumpkin. And guess who had to clean up the mess? And it was not fun. So I really please implore you to keep our program whole, because you don't want a huge mess. We already lived through that in neighborhood schools. Thank you.
Okay, that's our public comment. So I think what I'd like to do first is have the amendments presented, and then we'll have the resolution with the amendments. And then we can have a discussion about the resolution as it's amended. So with that, there are amendments for the board, and the first amendment, I believe, is one that's not going to be offered. Is that correct? Correct. And then, and same as amendment number 2. So we're heading right to number 3, and that's Director Bailey's amendment. Can you share what the amendment is and what its purpose and what it would do? And then we'll have, see if there's a first and a second. I'm sure there's going to be a first and a second. And then we'll either approve it and then discussion and then approve it.
Okay, do you want me to read it?
Well, just looking at it, you can do whatever you think is the most effective way to describe what it is that this amendment does. But I think since it hasn't been publicly vetted, maybe you should just read it.
Okay.
It hasn't been out that long.
I'll start there then. The board will defer action on setting boundaries for schools involved in creating Tubman and Roseway Heights middle schools, including potentially Alameda K-5, Beverly Cleary K-8, King K-5, Sabin K-5, Rose City Park K-5, Scott K-5, and Lee K-5, as detailed in sections 3A I, 3BI, 5A, 5BI, 5BII, and 5DI in the main resolution. To support the deliberation and action on the boundary decisions, the board requests data and assumption used in the analysis and detailed data results of the analysis, including but not limited to assumed catchment rates for each school, assumptions used to establish minimum enrollment targets in K-5s and middle schools, projected yearly enrollment by grade for each school for the 5-year planning period, and the specific assumptions used to determine that co-locating Access and the Vietnamese dual language immersion program at Rose City Park is not a viable option for the establishment of Roseway Heights Middle School and its feeder schools. That was a long sentence. Data on the proposed shift of part of Alameda to Sabin shall be included in the data release. In addition, the board will be provided with an estimate of the FTE, the number of teachers needed to fully staff each school and the budget impact for staffing above the current staffing pattern, essentially answering the question of how many extra FTE will be needed to fully staff schools in the first year of implementation.
So maybe you can now summarize in plain English what that would do if the board were to adopt it.
So what that would do would be delay somewhat the actual setting of the boundaries until we publicly and as a board can see the underlying assumptions involved in setting those boundaries. And also so that we know we're promising in the resolution to fully staff under-enrolled schools, not only within the 2 catchment areas, but really across the district. And that's a big step budget-wise. And I think we need to have a really good idea of, and it may help to hear this from principals at each of the affected schools too, what's the funding that what's the support level that we're actually need to fulfill that promise. We need to know that ahead of time as we head into budget season. And if there's some ways to shift boundaries in terms to minimize the impact of that, we need to maybe get ahead of that now to save some money so we can use it better somewhere else.
Do I have a motion?
Well, I'll move it.
I'll second.
So the amendment 3 offered by Director Bailey has been moved by Director Bailey and seconded by Director Constam. Is there any discussion?
I think the second piece about needing time for staff to fully deliver to us the costs associated with tweaking our staffing model so that every school, regardless of its enrollment, has adequate and equitable programming is really important. This does represent a pretty big change to how we do staffing now, and we don't know all the cost implications of that. So, as you said, it could have bearing on how the boundaries end up if we find that creating a school with boundaries that leave it under-enrolled by 100 students or something is just financially untenable. So it's a complex problem, but I think we're well underway in terms of getting the information that we need to make those decisions so that they're not so that we don't take that consideration in a vacuum.
And Superintendent Guerrero, I want to say again, your staff has been working incredibly hard on this and a number of, this is really complex work, and we're asking for a bit more here, and I appreciate that that's another big ask on staff who are doing, many of them doing at least 2 jobs. So I greatly appreciate what staff has done, and I don't take that lightly at all.
So I, go ahead, Moses.
Sorry. Just like with the mentioning of staffing, I was just wondering how the schools or the new schools such as Tubman would be staffed, because as we know, Tubman will be like a school that serves predominantly Black communities. So I just was wondering how it would be staffed since they're looking into staffing, because I know in our equity policy it says that it will work to hire a staff that reflects the student population in which it serves. And so it just sparked me to wonder how it would be staffed.
Do you want to answer? Superintendent Guerrero?
I think these are all good questions, and it's difficult to pick out, a few examples when part of the budget development process includes the superintendent's responsibility to develop the appropriate level of staffing to offer as comprehensive a program across the entire school portfolio. So that's actually the work that staff and I have to engage in. And already we are proposing to be pretty aggressive about that timeline, so the board knows that ahead of time. I've not seen a school district that tries to do that this far in advance, and It's our target goal to do that because we know it has implications for hiring and early contracting and affording our school communities as much advanced notice around what resources will be available to them. So I think you've heard the commitment on behalf of staff, and I know the board shares that commitment to make sure the foundational base level funding allows each school to have the appropriate level of staffing to ensure core instruction and an equitable level of enrichment and elective and every support staff are also there. And we should be iterating those staffing models all the time. And we have to look at that as a comprehensive package. And we also can't do that until we have as clear a fiscal picture as possible. And as you know, that's a moving target. And by the way, we're trying to settle a collective bargaining agreement and don't know the implications of that yet. So these are all very important questions, and we have to look at the bigger picture to see what we have to work with. But share your concern for making sure, whatever decisions we make, that we don't leave any under-enrolled school without an adequate or subsidized level of staffing to provide that kind of instruction that you'd expect in any school.
And in response to Moses's question about looking for teachers that really represent the students in terms of diversity, I think one thing that you mentioned was as we move to an earlier hiring practices, that's really going to help us because I am a teacher trainer. And yearly, our top quality students of color or bilingual people with special skills are snatched up by other districts that have early contracts. So I know that our focus there will help us to recruit and retain more teachers of color.
So I guess I want to mention one thing about the timing, because I think it might be tempting for people to think, this is the big delay, that we're going to defer action. But as the conversations when Director Bailey indicated he was going to offer this amendment, it was not with an intention to delay. It's to get the work right. And I think it's important for the community to know, when you think about so what sort of time frame is that? Our board policy on student assignment to neighborhood schools require that the board have final approval of boundary changes no later than January of the calendar year for the following school year. So that means this work that we're saying needs a bit more time and examination, and that we want to do it to get it right, that we need to do it in the next approximately 6 weeks. So just to be clear to the community, this isn't another planning year. It is time to get the work done right, and I think I'm going to be supportive of the amendment because I think we want to take the time to get this right, but I also think we want to keep moving.
Yes.
Anybody else want to speak to the amendment?
I just want to say I support the amendment. I was very glad to see it. I think we're very close, but I don't think we're quite there yet. And I think in order for everybody to feel confident that we're going to get this right, we need to take however long we need to take to show the work, provide the data. We're trying to be more transparent, and I think it will help if we can demonstrate that we're really doing our best here to make sure that where we end up is going to be doable for every school, and doable in terms of our financial resources, and doable in terms of the kinds of resources that are going to be available, the kids who are going to be in schools, so that we can have two-strand neighborhood programs that are robust. I think we can get there. I think we can get there relatively quickly, but I think we need a little more time.
Dr. Rosen? I support the amendment. Thank you. I also, though, am most comfortable knowing that there is a timeline so that this work doesn't get lost or, because we have to have some answers for the community. So I'm supportive within that time.
Do you want to say anything? It's not required. So I think the board will now vote on Amendment 3. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Student representative?
Yes.
And Director Anthony, I'm not sure if I heard you or if you're on mute.
Yes.
Thank you. So the board adopts Amendment 3 on a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Tran voting yes. So we'll now move to So now we're going to move to Amendment 4, and this is a amendment by Director Moore that will be placed right behind the, or beneath the item in the resolution relating to the comprehensive environmental assessment that the board is calling for. And I'd like to ask Director Moore to, as Director Bailey did, sort of explain what the amendment's about and what its outcome would be if it was adopted.
This is a difficult amendment to make, but I think we need to. It's with a fair amount of sadness that I'm making this amendment. In the last 48 hours, board members have received some information that suggests that there may be some significant environmental hazards present at the Harriet Tubman facility, and that the mitigation mechanisms that are currently in place may not be as robust as had been reported previously. In recognition that it may take many months to complete the testing and analysis of conditions at Tubman, this amendment to the resolution directs the superintendent and staff to begin a concurrent process to explore an alternative site for a middle school in case Tubman proves to be unsuitable. Here's the wording. In light of emerging information and recognizing that it may take months before the results of these comprehensive health and safety assessments are available, the board asks the superintendent to conduct concurrent contingency planning for alternative location in the event that the Harriet Tubman facility shows significant, irremediable health or safety risks for students and staff. District staff will explore and identify an alternative school site for a middle school through a process that includes meaningful, consistent, and extensive collaboration with all the affected school communities and full transparency to ensure the most positive outcomes for students. That would be under K in the recitals. And there would be an accompanying bullet in the resolutions, Resolution 6. The board directs the superintendent to conduct a thorough, comprehensive, and collaborative process of contingency planning for an alternative middle school site in the event the Tubman facility proves to be an unsuitable location. This planning process is to occur concurrent with the environmental assessment of Tubman, with the goal of opening the middle school on schedule for the 2018-19 school year.
Thank you, Director Moore. Do I have a motion? Second. The amendment number 4 is that right? Amendment number 4 is moved by Director Rosen and seconded by Director Esparza Brown. Is there any discussion on this resolution? So I'll go ahead. Oh.
Well, I think staff may want to elaborate a little bit more on the timeline for 1819 called for in that amendment. So probably a number of the staff could speak to that. But Dr. Laura Parker, could come and talk about, or Antonio Lopez, Assistant Superintendent, or Deputy Awad, I think could speak to the challenges that come with an 1819 opening of an alternative site to Tubman if necessary, what that would take, because it's a little more than planning off-site. It's because it impacts on a number of the staff that would need to be engaged from multiple sites.
I'm sorry, I'm looking for COO Jerry Vincent.
Yeah, we need Jerry here, but I can start while Jerry making his way here. As far as conducting the work for alternative plan, it really depends. I mean, if there is major facility work, that once we identify a facility and we need to do a lot of work from a facility perspective, that may require issuing permits, identifying what the issues, then conducting the community engagement. That may take some time. Our objective to meet the deadline to open middle schools next year was to make the decision as early as mid-October so we can get a lot of these things done by then. So I'm not ruling the idea, but I think it'll be very challenging to actually meet that deadline. It could happen, it could be not, but I think we ought to look at what we're dealing with, then come back to you with a recommendation whether that's doable or not. And that's my 2 cents on this one. And Jerry can speak more about the facility and potential issue remaining.
So, good evening. So regarding Tubman, there's 3 things we want to take a look at. Past studies that have been done regarding outdoor air quality, 3 or 4 different assessments of areas indoor air quality, and then what's been brought up is the question of whether there's an issue with Tubman and the hillside and any slippage there. So we've gone back. You have a lot of new folks here at the district. We've gone back, and the district has known a lot of these things, but not us, the folks here. So we've gone back, we've looked at a lot of research. We'd like to take the outdoor air quality study and have a third party examine that and perhaps conduct a new one because there's new standards since the one was done, I believe, in '09. Indoor air quality has never comprehensively been done, and it's on our policies, protocols to do for the future at all of our sites as part of it. But it hasn't been done on the entire Tubman facility. It was done on areas that are brought to the attention of the Risk Management Department. And then as far as the hillside, there's an issue. Our records show that last year, it was brought up years ago, but last year a company was commissioned to put some probes into the hillside and Tubman, and it's a 2-year study, which you'll know something after 1 year as to whether anything's moving or not. And then take 2 years in order to know that, so that would be more like the summer of '19, in which we'd know more about that. So, the superintendent has mentioned it, so has Yusuf. It's, these are safety issues, and I take them seriously as being responsible for that area, and I've inherited these, but we need to go town, we need to get to work on them and check them out and see, the validity, the veracity, and have a third-party study if that's what we need to do.
Thanks, Jerry.
So I think staff's addressed the issues, the unknown issues or questions that could arise or maybe not arise at Tubman, but I think the amendment speaks to us looking concurrently at exploring another alternative site.
Yes.
And could we elaborate on the reasons why opening on the same timeline might not be a possibility?
Sure. So any alternative site that's now being addressed goes back to an assessment of the facility, needs educationally, classroom size, putting an architect engineer to work and getting it done through the city permit, and then getting someone to bid, let alone within a dollar amount that we can afford, and then getting the work done in time for August next year. And it's a really difficult lift to be in November and taking a look at that. Very difficult.
So that's a bit of a response on the physical plant preparation, but
Yes.
there are other programmatic and staffing concerns.
Yeah, and just more high level, as we presented in August, the overview of the large-scale project plan for opening these 2 sites We obviously had an aggressive timeline and had some conversation about, what happens if. And we were pretty clear in that conversation that, again, was informed by project teams and folks working on this project over the years, that a change in scope would absolutely derail us from being able to open in 2018-19. So going to a Site B is certainly a significant change in scope, not only from the facilities perspective, but from the community perspective, from the staff perspective, and from working through those variables, and certainly that planning analysis, given the level of detail that's been requested for that kind of work. So it's definitely out of scope and
I would add that, the level of complexity in the alternative plan, it depends, obviously. If we identify a school that's currently have students in it, it would mean if it does require major construction, we will have to find a site for the kids that are in school in order to evacuate it and do the work on it, which is part of the problem that we have in the district right now. We just don't have facilities. So that will add a level of complexity to potentially meeting a deadline for next year for an alternative plan.
And of course, adding to an unknown budget impact, given such a significant change in scope, would obviously have a significant change in budget impact per what's been put forth.
So can I just see if I can summarize what that, so that if, after the comprehensive health and environmental assessment, that the finding is that there could be remediation and it would still be a suitable site, it would still be a challenge because we're taking a couple months out of the block to open for the 18-19 school year. But potentially still doable depending on how long the assessment takes and how much remediation. And I think what I heard you say, Dr. Parker, is that if we, if the remediation was so great that we felt it wasn't the right thing to do to have students in that school, we needed to move to another site, that it was much more likely to be a 2019, 2020, boy, that's hard to say, opening of the alternative site. Is that the correct summary?
I think that's what staff is saying, is we just don't have enough information, right? We don't know if any or how extensive the analysis, what it will reveal, what level of remediation. Perhaps we don't change site, but no one wants to think about a delay in an opening there, but perhaps it's possible to remediate with a little extra time and have Tubman be the fabulous school we all envision it being. If concurrently we're looking at an alternative, we also have to engage in the physical plant, the staffing, and the community engagement that would need to be involved in that. And to do that between now and August, you're hearing staff say we'd be reversing and starting the process we've been doing for Tubman with the planning principle for almost a year now, for over a year now.
And so just to be clear that this amendment, the language of the amendment is with the goal of the 18-19 school year. So I think that's an implicit understanding that we may be putting ourselves off track for that opening.
I just want to make sure we're really clear. I appreciate that it's a goal. I don't mind being held accountable, but I just want to be really clear. We don't know what we don't know, and we haven't discovered, and maybe everything's just fine, and we proceed.
Could I, Jerry, again on the slippage, where are we on the timeline? I didn't quite catch what you said in terms of, it's a
So,
2-year.
Early this summer, probes were put in the ground.
Early
and
this
after,
summer?
That's correct,
Okay.
2017. June of 18, they can do a first read on those and see, or even April after rainy season, see if anything has changed. But they've been commissioned to do a final report for June 2019 and tell us what they feel.
Okay.
With a
Thank you.
snapshot of what that looks like in spring, early summer of 18.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm just going to speak to the amendment. So as we've had some listening sessions over the last month and a half and the issues have been raised, and when we had our board meeting last week and we discussed potentially adding an amendment to do a comprehensive environmental analysis, it kind of took me back to the year 2000, I believe it was, when we had Whitaker Middle School with some I see the veterans nodding who were here then, but there were very significant mold issues, and then radon on top of that. And it was right before I got on the board the first time, and really the discussion when we got on by the time I got on the board was, would you want to have your own child in that school? And I think that the district made the right decision. It was a very traumatic thing for Northeast Portland to lose a middle school. But really, I think when everybody, asked themselves the question, if it was your child, would you want them to have them in that school? And the answer was no. So Whitaker doesn't exist anymore. It was razed to the ground. I think we all received the news that there could be some major environmental issues at Tubman, quite looking at it from a sense of, yes, we absolutely want to deliver on a middle school experience so that kids have an equitable experience in those grades, but also that we had a duty to look at those environmental factors. So hopefully we can remediate them, but I think this is the right course of action, even though it's later than we would like, but it's at a time in which we can still do the right thing, and if we move ahead, we will continue moving the calendar forward. But I think we can't ignore a potential problem. Anybody else? Director Moore?
I completely agree. At the very least, we cannot put kids in a toxic environment. I think that's the least we should demand of this district. But I admit to being deeply disappointed that we are where we are when we are. I wish we had looked at this. I wish we had looked at this when the first issues first arose. It's, and I would like to. I think we ought to look at how do we get here? Like, how come these issues weren't surfaced long before now? And I feel compelled to make a personal statement. I have gone around to various meetings and made assurances to school communities about with my understanding of the situation. And I have to apologize because I now believe that I was either misinformed or I misunderstood. And I passed along incorrect information. And I want to apologize. I wish I'd asked more questions. I wish we'd all asked more questions. And I'm very happy that we're now going to take this in hand and we are going to figure it out. I am profoundly disappointed that it may require a delay. I was looking forward to tonight. I was planning to crack open champagne later. And I just kind of, I don't feel like champagne tonight. But it still is, I mean, we are still making progress. We are going to open these middle schools. We're going to do this. We're going to do it right. And I think the best we can say at this point is what you're seeing tonight is this board taking our responsibilities seriously. So this is going to be, if it turns out that we can't open Tubman, and we do have to look at an alternative site, this is going to be a wrenching experience for many people in that community. Many, many people. And as we proceed with this, I think we need to be mindful of that. And we need to be very attentive to engaging the community meaningfully throughout this process as it goes forward.
And what does this mean to, equitable instruction and curriculum? I think that as a board, we will also commit that as we're working through these, that the children will still have the opportunities for full access to the programs that we are promising them.
Any other discussion on this amendment? Anything else you all think the board needs to know? No? Okay. Thank you. So the board will now vote on amendment number 4. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, indicate by saying no. Student Representative Tran?
Yes.
Board Member Paul Anthony?
Yes.
The amendment is approved on a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Tran voting yes. Our last amendment for consideration, there's actually 3 parts to it. And this is amendment I'm just offering. Some of it's cleanup and some of it's providing some more clarity. And then the last one is providing a little bit more flexibility. So the amendment does 3 things. First, all references in the resolution after the word Tubman, where it's appropriate, will need to add the word or alternative site. Then on page 8, number K, or letter K, is that's the one dealing with the environmental assessment. And the first sentence starts out no later than November 15th, and we're going to replace that with on an expedited basis. And this should give the staff the flexibility that, ideally, we'd love to have it November 15th or earlier, but we want it done well, and so this gives the staff the flexibility. And then third, on page 8, letter H, this is the amendment related to access. And one of the things, I know the discussion leading up to tonight's meeting, there was, I think, an agreement by the board that we felt that access deserved a home, and that it was, and we believed that Superintendent Guerrero's vision for TAG services is one that we want to support as well, so that we have sort of this 2-part amendment. And as part of that, in terms of the facility that we were discussing for TAG, that we had initially had it permanent facility or facilities, and then it got changed to facility because we understand there's a strong desire to keep the school community together. There also were discussions by both individuals within the access community, the board, the superintendent, that there potentially could be a sort of a feel of one school, perhaps over 2 sites, maybe that were close by, and that we wanted to provide the flexibility. The goal is still one facility, but there are, we do want to provide some flexibility to the superintendent, because if we found, I'm just going to give you an example, if we found the ideal sort of adjacent sites, or 2 buildings next to each other, or 2 schools within 5 blocks, and we wanted to do that, we'd have to go back and change the resolution. I think the intent of the,
Yes.
so My intent in offering this is, we're still shooting for one permanent facility, but we also want to have flexibility for ideas that have been offered that could provide a very, a one-school experience. So that's those are the 3 amendments. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Director Esparza Brown, seconded by Director Bailey. Is there any discussion? Superintendent Guerrero?
I just want to affirm Chair Brim Edwards' statement to the community here. The goal remains to find a home for Access Academy that is as contained to one building as possible, or 2 buildings that constitute a campus facility. But I'm looking forward to circling back to the school community with some bolder options along with staff, and we're going to keep having that conversation together.
Great, and I think I would say the board really appreciates you personally going out and looking at sites and attempting to have every part of the school community that's involved in this have their needs met to the extent possible. So thank you for your personal engagement in that. Any other discussion? Okay, so the board will now vote on Amendment 5. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Student Representative Tran?
Yes.
So Amendment 5 is adopted on a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Tran voting aye. So we now have a Resolution 5528 as amended. We're ready to consider the work before us. And as I said when we started, I think this is a very exciting night. There's been lots of work going into this, and I know many of us feel that while this is a big step this evening, there's much work to be done going forward to make sure that when the schools open, they are the schools that we'd want to have our own kids in. So with that, I'm going to ask any board members, is there any discussion, questions for staff on the now amended resolution?
I think we've discussed.
Okay, are we ready? This just seems too easy.
I think that's what I'm sensing anyways. I think I share Director Moore's sort of sentiment right now, in that it's an important step to affirm this commitment. And I know I'm not going to pop open a bottle of champagne until we settle a home for Access and any other impacted school communities. And that we do the necessary work, that we first and foremost ensure every one of our students is in a healthy and safe building, and that we do our due diligence, and that we be accountable and transparent about it. So we'll get there, but I think nonetheless, it's an important step to take tonight towards that.
Well, and I want to reaffirm that, I think that the community, the Northeast community, has taken a lot of hits, and that we're really aware of that. So affirm that we are really committed to ensuring equitable education from this point forward as we're moving forward to figure this out.
And when the time comes, champagne's on me.
Whoa.
Hey.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry, what was your name?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
you're on camera.
can we make sure that gets into the minutes?
So, while recognizing that we're still have some work to do, I'm going to symbolically raise a little glass of champagne to Roseway Heights.
Yeah, here, here.
Chair Brim
any-
Edwards, I'd be remiss if I also, in the interest of making sure we're serving all of our students and all of our communities, had some pretty heartfelt conversations with many of our African American leaders in the Albina neighborhood today. And they understand. No one wants their children in a facility that isn't safe and able to thrive. So there's a level of understanding there. Hopefully what we're able to convey here is that we're not giving up on the commitment to open a comprehensive middle school that serves students from Albina. So I just feel like I need to say that.
Anybody else? So I'm just going to close again by thanking staff for all the work. This has really been a heavy lift. And I think this is just the start. So I know that there's a lot of work of staff here in the central office, but also in the buildings that will be supporting the work ahead to make sure that the schools, when they're open, are successful. I also want to thank the community, because I think this has been quite a 6-week or 8-week process, and members of the community, I think they from all the different schools really approached this in it was heartwarming to have parents from one school advocating for kids in another school and advocating for kids who hadn't had a middle school experience. And I think this is part of the beauty of Portland, where you get parents looking out for other kids, the kids of other parents, and I think people, while passions were high, and the stakes are high for a lot of the communities, people really approached it in we're going to try and get to a place where it works for all our kids. And I think tonight's first step is a first step in that. We have work to be done, and hopefully when this is all done, we can say that we did it for everybody. So thanks to the community. And then finally, just to the board members, I know that this was a huge, complex issue that we added on top of a lot of other work that we've done, and that individual board members have a lot of expertise, they have commitment to the issue, a passion around making sure we've done right for our kids, and I have been, the work ethic and the time that board members have put into it, I really want to say thank you to everybody. And to our new superintendent, who arrived right in the middle of the conversation, thank you for jumping right in. I think, we're really looking forward to, when we hired you as an education leader, this next phase of the work, that's going to be more important than ever. So thank you for not insisting that you had some sort of honeymoon, but that you're just going to jump right in. So, with that, we have a resolution on 5528 on the table. It's been moved and seconded. The board will now vote on resolution 5528. All in favor?
That's as amended, right?
Yes. Thank you.
So
it would have been a pity. It would have been a pity to have wasted all that work. You've earned your money tonight, Jim. So we'll vote on resolution 5528 as amended. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. Director Anthony?
Yes.
Student Representative Tran?
Yes.
Resolution 5528 is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Tran voting yes. Nice job, board. So now we're going to go to conference reports. So now I'm going to ask Directors Esparza Brown and Comstan for any reports or information from the recent Council of Great City Schools event you were at.
Start. Okay, so as the PPS board representative, I had the great privilege of attending the Council of the Great City Schools Fall Conference in Cleveland, Ohio last week, along with Superintendent Guerrero and an administrative team. The council, if you don't know, represents 68 of the nation's largest urban school districts in a coalition that's dedicated to improve the education of children in inner cities, in inner city schools. And the organization does this through a focus on legislation, communication, research, and technical assistance that to keep the members and the public well informed on all the best practices in teaching and learning in big cities. So as a board representative, then I attended the Saturday board meeting along with Superintendent Guerrero and learned more about the ways that the council provides technical assistance around many of the challenges that urban city schools like us face, particularly in narrowing the achievement gaps and organizational structures and a lot of the ways in which we know that we can make improvements. And so I'm really thankful to kind of hear the breadth of the kinds of support that we can get from them. The sessions that I attended, there were many, many interesting sessions, but the one that I wanted to particularly focus on was one that was given by both the Oakland schools and Los Angeles school districts around the DACA resolutions and how they have further refined their resolutions and really kind of operationalized those to look like in one school district, for example, a gray folder with a district protocol for ICE entering a school was at every front office, and all the staff knew where that was, so that the protocols are there and available and easily accessible. And this district also worked with their community partners to provide support to individual families if a family member had been detained. So working to support that family in many ways, from the children to the parents to helping connect them to legal services. I'll share their websites with our staff, and as we continue to revisit and evolve, I think, our own DACA work. There were interesting keynote speakers that included Rosario Dawson that I missed because I have jet lag and she was 8 in the morning. But we heard Bill Gates, who talked about their new investment of $1.7 billion for K-12 education over the next 5 years, and he kind of discussed the key strategies for the future for them. And while this was focused on education, he wasn't nearly as much fun as the next day's luncheon speaker, who was Van Jones of CNN, who talked about his own personal stories in education. He had a lot of humor, and then talked about the current political strife in the country and our core beliefs. Yet, at the end of it all, he has this wonderment at our nation's ability to continue to work together. So it was really an inspiring message, even in this difficult time. And then to cap the day, he ended by moderating a town hall on equity issues, which was great. And lastly, we took the opportunity to sponsor a celebratory hour to welcome our new superintendent. That was well attended by colleagues across the nation that were offering congratulations to us in our smart hire, and that was great. So overall, it was a conference of the highest caliber, and I look forward to representing PPS in all the future work with the council.
If I could just say thank you to Director Sparza Brown and CONSTAM for representing the PPS board and that lovely reception that colleagues were in attendance for. And I'll only add to your comprehensive report that Portland Public Schools has already been nominated to be the hosting site this coming early summer in June for a curriculum and instruction and chief information officers gathering here in Portland.
Great. Director Comstock?
That was a great report. Thanks, Julie. Just want to add that it's just an amazing opportunity to really dive into best practices on just a multitude of areas. So much to learn from our colleagues across the country, both in the formal sessions as well as informally in conversation. I had the opportunity to sit with some of Guadalupe's former colleagues from San Francisco who had a really phenomenal presentation around On Track to Graduation initiatives. And they have been at it long enough to really see the data and the fruits of those efforts, as well as similar efforts in, not similar, but like efforts in Houston and Chicago that are really moving the needle for kids. So this is all one of the best things about the Council of Great City Schools is that everyone is there to share what their successes have been and to help partner districts adopt some of the same practices. So that's really an amazing opportunity for us, and we do tap into that network a lot. I had the opportunity to facilitate also a session around building principal pipelines and partnerships with higher ed partners on how to really develop principal leadership and grow your own, so to speak. So those, again, are really fruitful conversations. And then also just informally, we, in the last year through our superintendent search process, have had the opportunity to lean on some of our friends and colleagues from the council around, on reaching out to find the best candidates and how to support a new candidate. Had a lot of conversations with districts that have brought on new superintendents in the last couple of years about what was your onboarding process and what can you teach us about how to really support our superintendent in the first year of his work here. So that's all just really critical, good work. We also had an opportunity informally to share some of our health and safety work and our gap analysis and health and safety inventory that is being considered by other districts as really a national model for that work, because the infrastructure side of the house is often commonly ignored, but everyone has the same kind of problems that we have faced so acutely in the last year. So, Dr. John, I was really proud to be able to share your work, and others were really glad to receive it. Thank you.
Any other reports?
So I talked to you about reporting on our Madison student, bioscience.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
please.
Okay, so my day job, I work as an economist over in Vancouver, and I was at an economic development luncheon this last week over there and ran into somebody who worked at a partner organization there, but now heads the Oregon Bioscience Council. And next Monday, they are doing a big shindig, and part of that is where local companies and researchers come and make a pitch for a new technology that they've developed or new product. And they decided this year they've added fast pitches, which are 3-minute, highly structured pitches, and that would include grad students and, for the first time, high school students. And so I said, anybody from Portland Public? And I was delighted to find out that Cynthia Bui, a student from Madison, will be making one of those pitches. So we hope to have her here after she makes the pitch to tell us about it in the coming weeks. But that's a pretty exciting thing, and I'm going to go and be there and scored a couple of tickets for Petra Callan, the principal at Madison, and a teacher, and one of our TOSAs. And if any of you want to come along, we'll figure it out. And I know you're going to be out of town. That's unfortunate, but so hope to have her come back and report on her experience. But I was pretty excited.
I just wanted to quickly say that Super SAC, I know that a few weeks ago I had talked about our priorities and where we were moving, but have taken a pause, just to say that we've taken on pause of that and taken a new direction. Instead, we're looking at going into the schools and proposing a more sustainable way of electing people to work on the district Super SAC, because in years previous, it hasn't been sustainable, and like every year that we're working, it's like a new system that we're like how we recruit people. So I just want to say that we're working, now we're just really streamlining, like working on building a sustainable way in hopefully at each school having a elected position from their student body on who they would choose to represent their school at a district level. So that's just how I wanted to say.
Right. So I just have a brief report from the task force on policy and governance, and we met yesterday, and Directors Moore and Rosen are also on it, and this was a renewal. We've had several meetings about the district's complaint policy. I thought yesterday's was very productive, and I want to thank Jim Harris, the General Counsel, and Kylie Rogers for the help, the assistance, and the leadership they're providing as we rework the new complaint policy. And Director Moore received or secured several model complaint policies from OSBA that should provide a framework for that, and we likely are going to take some of the value language from our current complaint policy and then sort of meld it with the OSBA language, and that the OSBA stands for Oregon School Boards Association, and that language should comply with all the recent state laws. So we're hopeful we'll have, in not too long of a time, a draft policy to bring to the board for consideration, and we've asked, well, as is appropriate, Jim Harris and Kylie will both work on the administrative directive, which is the complementary piece to the new policy. So I guess to board members, hopefully that will be coming. And I know Director Constam, in your committee, you've got some work related to the Title IX as well.
The sexual harassment policy.
Anybody else? The business agenda. The board will now consider the remainder of the business agenda, having already voted on Resolution 5528. Ms. Hewson, are there any changes to the business agenda? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Director Bailey, seconded by Director, I guess we're kind of the same time. Seconded by Director, okay. Moved by Director Constam, seconded by Director Bailey. Is there any public comment? No public comment. Is there any board discussion on the business agenda?
I just want to say it's really exciting to see the design contract for Madison High School in there and get that work underway.
Yay, I think I saw a notice also for the DAG, for the Madison Design Advisory Group. All right, the board will now vote on the business agenda. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 Student representative?
Yes.
No abstentions. The business agenda is approved on a 7-0 vote with Student Representative Tran voting yes. And the
I'd like to lodge a protest that we are 43 minutes ahead of schedule.
Don't get used to
Sweet.
this. I was telling Superintendent Guerrero, this is the benefit of having committees, that you have work that's done and it comes to the full board ready for discussion. And this is a testimony if you do your homework.
We won't say it's easier on staff, but okay.
Yeah. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.